Good afternoon, everybody. How are we? Good to see all of you. It's an honor to be here with all of you. A lot of familiar faces in the room, a lot of new faces. And President Trump is back, and the golden age of America has most definitely begun.
But speaking of Donald Trump, I was stunned and amazed by his new White House spokeswoman today. She's actually the youngest ever in that job. Caroline Leavitt, she's just 27 years old. But boy, was she giving it to the Trump haters in her first White House briefing. It was such sass, like this answer about the illegal immigrants that Trump is now getting kicked out of the country.
How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
Bang, Rowan, I couldn't do that at 27. No nonsense, straight to the point, courage, detail. By the way, I think the way that she answered is a lesson that many Liberal MPs could learn, faced by, ABC journalists or whatever, although I have to give Peter Dutton huge credit. He does give it right back as well.
Yeah, I think this is the new era of political leaders being honest. The days of spin, of all those advisors telling our politicians, oh, don't say this, you'll offend so-and-so. Make sure you mention this point. That's your talking points. But the reality is they shouldn't need to be. Because if you are the political leader, if you are a senior politician or any politician, you should be able to answer any question instantly, straight from the heart on your fundamental basic principles. Maybe you need to fill in some of the specific detail at a later point, but you should be able to tell the truth on any single issue.
There was a really interesting change, I think, that Leavitt announced for who could get into the White House briefings now, which journalists and whatever, and who got to ask questions. The mainstream media there is now going to be joined by the new media, including the kind of podcasters and influencers who actually helped get Donald Trump elected. Have a listen to her.
And in keeping with this revolutionary media approach that President Trump deployed during the campaign, the Trump White House will speak to all media outlets and personalities, not just the legacy media who are seated in this room. Because according to recent polling from Gallup, Americans' trust in mass media has fallen to a record low. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat.
Caroline clearly did her homework. She was very well prepared to talk not only about the issues of the day, but also about everything that her boss had already answered, which is probably kind of hard when he is answering questions off the cuff roughly 10 times a day. Yes, everything with the seating chart is the same, just there are a lot more people standing on the sides. It looked like dozens of people standing on the sides, whereas at the tail end of the Biden administration, not only was there nobody standing on the sides, but there were empty seats. And then the only people who lost seats are actually White House staff. They added, there would usually be 2 aides that the press secretary could just kind of look down at and say, hey, we're going to get them something about this, right? Those 2 seats are now going to be taken by new media outlets. Yesterday it was Axios and Breitbart.
Peter, what's the temperature in the room? Is it more adversarial like it was the first term, or is it more probative?
That's a great question. Yesterday, it seemed like for the reporters in the room, and I was not there, Jackie Heinrich was there, but it seemed like for the reporters in the room and for Caroline, everybody was just kind of feeling each other out. They wanted to see how far they could push her with questions and how she would answer. And it's going to take time for reporters in the room and also for Caroline to develop a rhythm. But yesterday, I think, was just kind of everybody was feeling each other out.
And Peter, you said they're going to have some White House staffers kind of right there where she can turn and say, hey, well, what do we know about that? That kind of goes back to the first day of the Trump administration. You were in the Oval Office with the president and you asked him a bunch of questions, and one of them was about drones, and he turned to Susie Wiles and he said, can we get something for them on drones? And yesterday, the press, that's actually how Caroline started the press conference.
Yeah, some good constituent services there, because it was only a week after I asked the president what the deal was with those drones over New Jersey that we heard so much about, and now we hear nothing about. And she went out there with a message from the president, who did get to the bottom of it, or at least got to the bottom of what they can say publicly, and he said these were FAA authorized drone flights that then were joined by a bunch of hobbyists who were putting up their own drones to see what was going on, but they were not adversarial. That is a huge news story that obviously there's so much going on. There are so many huge news stories, but that is a really, really big one.
Before I take your questions, I would like to point out to all of you once again have access to the most transparent and accessible president in American history. There has never been a president who communicates with the American people and the American press corps as openly and authentically as the 45th and now 47th President of the United States. This past week, President Trump has held multiple news conferences, gaggled on Air Force One multiple times, and sat down for a two-part interview on Fox News, which aired last week. As Politico summed it up best, Trump is everywhere again. And that's because President Trump has a great story to tell about the legendary American revival that is well underway.
Thank you, Caroline, and it's great to finally be called on as well in the briefing room. I appreciate that. Of course, we know President Trump just got back from North Carolina and California meeting with victims of natural disasters. There's the 2-year anniversary of the East Palestine, Ohio toxic train derailment. Does the President have any plans to go visit the victims of that toxic spill, or just visit in general?
No plans that I can read out for you here. If that changes, I will certainly keep you posted. What I can tell you is that President Trump still talks about his visit to East Palestine, Ohio. That was one of the turning points, I would say, in the previous election campaign, where Americans were reminded that President Trump is a man of the people, and he, as a candidate, visited that town that was just derailed by the train derailment, no pun intended, and he offered support and hope, just like I saw the president do this past week. It was a purposeful decision by this president on his first domestic trip to go to North Carolina and to California to visit with Americans who were impacted by Hurricane Helene and also by the deadly fires. A red state and a blue state, both of which feel forgotten by the previous administration and the federal government. That is now ended under President Trump. He will continue to put Americans first, whether they're in East Palestine, in Pacific Palisades, or in North Carolina.
Thank you, Caroline. On California, could you please clarify what the military did with the water last night as referenced in the President's Truth Social post?
The water has been turned back on in California, and this comes just days after President Trump visited Pacific Palisades, and as you all saw, applied tremendous pressure on state and local officials in Pacific Palisades, including Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, to turn on the water and to direct that water to places in the south and in the middle of the state that have been incredibly dry, which has led to the expansion, the rapid expansion of these fires.
So could you clarify what the military's role was, where the water came from, and how it got there?
Again, the Army Corps of Engineers has been on the ground in California to respond to the devastation from these wildfires, and I would point out that just days after President Trump visited the devastation from these fires, the water was turned on. That is because of the pressure campaign he put on state and local officials there who clearly lack all common sense. And I will never forget being at that roundtable with the president last week and hearing the frustration in the voices of Pacific Palisades residents who feel as though their government has just gone insane. Before President Trump showed up on the scene, Karen Bass was telling private property owners that they would have to wait 18 months to access their private property. So this administration, the president and his team that's on the ground in California, Rick Grinnell, who he has designated to oversee this great crisis, will continue to put pressure on Karen Bass and state and local officials to allow residents to access their properties. This is a huge part of it. These residents want to take part in their own clearing out of their properties. They should be able to do that. It's the United States of America. What happened to our freedom? Clearly it's gone in California, but not anymore.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.